The first thing I registered wasn't the silence, although that was unusual for a Saturday morning in our little slice of suburban purgatory. No lawnmowers battling it out in a symphony of misplaced aggression, no kids screaming with the boundless energy that only a sugar-fueled breakfast can provide, just quiet. It was the empty space that screamed loudest. The perfectly rectangular patch of driveway, where Bertha, my beloved silver behemoth of a trailer, should have been, was starkly, terrifyingly bare. Bertha wasn't just any trailer. She was my livelihood, my rolling workshop, the culmination of every late night, every ramen noodle dinner, every sacrificed weekend. Inside her gleaming aluminum skin resided the tools of my trade, the instruments of my passion. A saw-stop table saw that could sense a hot dog and retract faster than a politician backpedaling on a promise. A festool domino jointer that whispered sweet nothings of perfect joinery, and enough clamps to hold together the shattered dreams of 1,000 DIY disasters. Bertha was an extension of myself, a metal and wood heart on wheels. My stomach dropped like a toddler missing a step. Disbelief morphed into a cold dread that snaked its way up my spine. I blinked, half expecting her to reappear, as if this was some cruel trick of the morning light. But the emptiness remained, a gaping maw in the mundane reality of my Saturday. "No," I whispered, the sound swallowed by the oppressive quiet. "No freaking way." I did a frantic 360, scanning the street. Had I parked her somewhere else in a sleep-deprived stupor after that late-night cabinet install? Unlikely. I always parked her in the driveway, a silent, solid sentinel guarding my little slice of the American dream. A slightly lopsided ranch house with peeling paint and a perpetually hopeful vegetable garden. Then I saw it, a glint of freshly installed metal about 20 feet down the curb. A brand spanking new no parking sign, its black lettering a stark declaration against the pale morning sky. It looked so official, so permanent, and so utterly, suspiciously sudden. I swear, just yesterday, that spot was as sign-free as a politician's promises are consequence-free. My blood began to simmer. This had Karen written all over it. Karen, the self-appointed queen of our homeowners association, a woman whose life's ambition seemed to revolve around meticulously measuring the height of everyone's grass and dictating the acceptable shade of beige for our mailboxes. She treated the HOA guidelines like the 10 Commandments, and woe betide anyone who dared to misplace a comma. Just as the first tendrils of righteous fury began to tighten around my chest, a vision in pastel cruised into view. Karen, perched regally on her electric golf cart, a clipboard clutched in her manicured hand like a scepter. Her lips, painted a shade that could curdle milk, were pursed in a smug, self-satisfied line. She didn't even need to say anything. Her very posture radiated an "I told you so" that could be felt across the cul-de-sac. As she puttered past, her eyes flicked towards my empty driveway, and a fleeting, almost imperceptible smirk played on her lips. It was the Mona Lisa smile of suburban tyranny. "You?" I yelled, my voice cracking with a mixture of disbelief and rage. "Karen, did you see my trailer? My silver 20-foot trailer that was parked right here?" She didn't even bother to stop. "The one that was illegally parked?" She called back, her voice saccharine sweet yet laced with a venom that could strip paint. "It's been towed. Rules are rules." And with that pronouncement, she continued her swinshi, the electric hum of her golf cart, a mocking soundtrack to my growing despair. Rules are rules. Oh, I was about to learn all about the rules. My first call was to the non-emergency police line. Maybe, just maybe, Bertha had been stolen. The officer who answered sounded about as enthused as a sloth on caffeine withdrawal. After a brief, uninspired description from me, he informed me that no trailer matching Bertha's description had been reported stolen. "Have you checked with local towing companies?" he droned, the question sounding more like a dismissal. "Local towing companies?" "Right. Of course." A quick search on my phone yielded a few likely candidates. I started dialing, each ring amplifying the knot of anxiety in my stomach. The first two were dead ends. The third, however, delivered the gut punch I was dreading. "Predator Towing, how can I help you?" A voice devoid of any discernible human emotion answered. It sounded like gravel gargling with motor oil. "Yeah, I think my trailer might have been towed," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "It's a silver enclosed trailer, about 20 feet long, says Precision Carpentry on the side." There was a pause, punctuated by the clatter of keys. License plate? I rattled it off, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Another pause. Then, the gravelly voice returned, laced with a hint of bored triumph. Yep, we got it. Illegally parked in violation of HOA regulations. But that sign wasn't there yesterday, I protested, my voice rising in desperation. Signage is irrelevant, the voice stated flatly. The property owner requested the tow. Karen, that viper in a floral dress. Okay, well, how do I get it back? I asked, trying to remain calm, to reason with the unreasonable. What followed was a litany of fees that sounded like they'd been pulled directly from the ninth circle of hell. That'll be $500 for the tow, $200 for the impound fee, $150 for the special equipment fee. Special equipment? They just hooked it up and dragged it. And a $100 gate fee, plus $100 a day for storage, starting from, let's see, yesterday at 8 a.m. cash only. $700 plus $100 a day. For a BS parking violation. My jaw dropped. This wasn't just about towing a trailer, it was highway robbery, suburban edition. That's outrageous, I sputtered. That's more than my monthly mortgage payment. Those are our rates, the voice replied, utterly unmoved. You want your trailer back, you pay the fees. Click. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone, a cold fury bubbling beneath the surface. I sank onto my couch, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Bertha wasn't just a trailer, she was my investment, my future. Without her, I couldn't work. Without work, I couldn't pay the bills. Karen's petty power play had the potential to derail my entire life. I needed a plan, and it needed to be a damn good one. Later that day, I found myself perched on a sticky vinyl stool at O'Malley's, the dimly lit sanctuary where logic went to drown its sorrows and questionable decisions were often born. Across from me sat Leo, my best friend since high school, a man whose calm demeanor and sharp mind usually served as a much-needed anchor in my often turbulent existence. He was currently nursing a pint of Guinness and listening to my increasingly animated rant with a patient, if slightly weary, expression. And then he just hung up, $700 just to get my trailer back, and then $100 a day. It's insane, Leo, absolutely insane. I slammed my fist lightly on the bar, causing a nearby salt shaker to jump. Leo sighed, taking a slow sip of his beer. Dude, I get it. It sucks. Karen's a menace, and those towing companies are leeches. But what can you do? You're going to have to pay the fee and move on. Move on? I scoffed. Leo, that's easy for you to say. It's not your life savings sitting in that impound lot. It's not your business that's about to grind to a halt because some power-hungry busybody decided my perfectly legally parked trailer was suddenly an eyesore. Okay, Leo said, holding up his hands in a gesture of surrender. So what are you going to do? Start a one-man war against the HOA? Maybe, I said, a spark igniting in my chest. But I've got a better idea. Leo raised a skeptical eyebrow. Oh yeah? What's that? I leaned in, lowering my voice. What if I didn't just pay the fee? What if I bought the towing company? Leo choked on his Guinness. He coughed for a good minute, his face turning an alarming shade of red. Finally, he managed to gasp. You? You want to? What now? Buy Predator Towing, I repeated, a grin spreading across my face. The more I said it, the more ludicrously brilliant it sounded. Leo stared at me, his mouth agape. Alex, are you out of your mind? You're a carpenter, not a tow truck magnate. You just told me you can barely afford the impound fees, let alone buy an entire business. I know, it sounds crazy, I admitted. But think about it. Predator Towing is clearly running a racket. They're probably making a killing off these predatory tows. And who's their biggest customer? Our lovely HOA, courtesy of Queen Karen. So, you buy the company, and then what? You just stop towing people? Leo asked, still looking utterly bewildered. Not exactly, I said, a more detailed plan beginning to form in my mind. I buy the company, I get Bertha back for free, and then, well, then I make things right. For everyone who's been ripped off by these guys. Leo shook his head slowly. Alex, that sounds like something out of a bad movie. Maybe, I conceded, but wouldn't it be a hilarious movie? The next day, armed with a newfound, albeit slightly insane, sense of purpose, I drove to the address listed on the Predator Towing sticker. It was located in a less than glamorous industrial park on the outskirts of town, The building itself was a drab, cinder block affair, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin. The yard surrounding it was a chaotic jumble of impounded vehicles, a metal graveyard of unfortunate parking decisions and forgotten registrations. I walked into the dimly lit office, the air thick with the smell of stale cigarette smoke and desperation. A woman with tired eyes and a permanent scowl sat behind a cluttered counter, talking loudly on the phone. Yeah, the usual price. You want it back sooner, you pay more. Look, lady, I don't make the rules. She slammed the phone down with a sigh that could curdle milk. Can I help you? She asked, her tone suggesting she'd rather be anywhere else. Yeah, I'm here about my trailer, I said, trying to sound assertive. Name? I told her, and she tapped away at a prehistoric-looking computer. Okay, the balance is $700 plus $100 for today. Right, I said. Look, I was wondering, is the owner around? She eyed me suspiciously. Why? I'm interested in maybe buying the business. I blurted out, the words feeling foreign and ridiculous as soon as they left my mouth. The woman's scowl deepened. You? Buying this dump? You got that kind of money? Maybe, I said, trying to play it cool. Is the owner here? She shrugged. Yeah, he's in the back. Don't get your hopes up, pal. He ain't selling. She gestured towards a grimy door behind her. I took a deep breath and walked towards it, feeling a bizarre mix of nervousness and exhilaration. This was either going to be the most brilliant or the most spectacularly idiotic thing I'd ever done. I knocked on the door, and a gruff voice yelled, "Come in!" The office inside was even more depressing than the reception area. Piles of paperwork overflowed from every surface, empty fast food containers littered the desk, and the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and unfulfilled potential. Behind the desk sat a man who looked like he'd wrestled a bear, and the bear had won. He was overweight, balding, and his face was a roadmap of bad decisions. This had to be Mr. Slate, the infamous owner of Predator Towing. He looked me up and down with a jaded expression. Yeah? What do you want? Mr. Slate, my name is Alex, I said, trying to project an air of confidence I definitely didn't feel. My trailer was towed yesterday. Yeah, illegally parked. 700 plus 100 a day, I know the drill, he interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. Pay up or it stays here. Actually, Mr. Slate, I continued, I'm not here to pay. I'm here to talk about buying your business. Mr. Slate stared at me for a long moment, then let out a harsh bark of laughter. You? Buy my business? Kid, you look like you can barely afford a tank of gas, let alone a whole towing operation. I've been doing some research, I said, trying to sound businesslike. And it seems like Predator Towing has a bit of a reputation. Mr. Slate's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? Well, I continued, pulling out a hastily printed sheet of paper. I've noticed quite a few complaints with the Better Business Bureau, and there seem to be some rumblings about potential lawsuits regarding unfair towing practices. I was bluffing, of course. I'd found a couple of angry online reviews, but nothing concrete. Still, it seemed to make him uneasy. That's just disgruntled customers, he grumbled, but his gaze flickered away from mine. And then there are the whispers I've heard from some of your drivers, I added, pressing my non-existent advantage. They don't seem too happy with the way things are run around here. Again, a complete fabrication based on the receptionist's sour demeanor. Mr. Slate leaned back in his creaky chair, his arms crossed over his ample belly. Look, kid, my business is none of your concern. If you want your trailer back, you know the price. Otherwise, get out of my office. What if, I said, taking a calculated risk, what if I could offer you a way out? A clean break? No more disgruntled customers, no more lawsuits, no more unhappy employees? He looked at me with a flicker of interest in his beady eyes. What are you getting at? I'm prepared to make you an offer for Predator Towing, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. A cash offer. It might not be what you think it's worth, considering the circumstances, but it would be a clean and quick transaction. Mr. Slate scoffed. Name a price, kid. Let's see how delusional you really are. I swallowed hard and threw out a number that Leo had helped me calculate. A ridiculously lowball figure that I knew was probably offensive, but it was all the loan I could realistically secure. Mr. Slate erupted in another harsh laugh. Are you kidding me? I wouldn't sell this paperweight for that. And so began the most bizarre negotiation of my life. I played up the negative aspects of his business, the potential legal troubles, the difficulty of finding reliable staff. He countered with inflated valuations and tales of past glories. It was a surreal dance of desperation and thinly veiled threats. After what felt like an eternity, we reached a compromise. It was still more than I had initially hoped to pay, but it was a price I could manage, thanks to Leo's financial wizardry and a surprisingly understanding loan officer who seemed to appreciate the sheer audacity of my plan. The paperwork was rushed, sloppy, and smelled faintly of stale pizza. But by the end of the week, it was official. I, Alex, the humble carpenter, was the proud owner of Predator Towing. The first order of business was retrieving Bertha. Walking into the impound lot as the owner, rather than the victim, was a surreal experience. The same gruff employees who had barely acknowledged me before now offered hesitant nods. I found Bertha nestled amongst a motley collection of dented sedans and forlorn-looking pickup trucks. She looked dusty and slightly resentful, like a loyal steed unjustly locked in a stable. The moment I unlocked her doors and stepped inside, the familiar scent of sawdust and wood shavings filled my nostrils, a comforting balm to my frayed nerves. It was good to have her back. The next day, I gathered the small crew of Predator Towing, the tired receptionist, the two grizzled tow truck drivers I'd briefly met, and a mechanic who looked like he hadn't seen the sun in years. They sat around the cluttered office, their faces a mixture of suspicion and apprehension. "All right," I said, standing in front of them, trying to project an air of authority that felt utterly fake. "My name is Alex, and I'm your new boss." A few mumbled greetings rippled through the room. "I know this is probably unexpected," I continued. "And I know this company has a certain reputation." The tired receptionist snorted softly. "Well," I said, "things are going to change. Starting now, we're getting a new name, Second Chance Towing." A ripple of surprise went through the room. "We're going to operate ethically and fairly," I continued. "No more predatory towing. No more made-up fees. And we're going to start by righting the wrongs of the past." The mechanic, a man whose hands were permanently stained with grease, finally spoke. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means," I said, meeting his gaze, "that we're going to go through the records, identify every questionable tow and every bogus fee, and we're going to refund every single person who was ripped off by this company." A stunned silence filled the room. The receptionist looked like she might faint. One of the tow truck drivers, a burly guy with a handlebar mustache, finally spoke up. You're going to give money back?" "That's right," I said firmly. "And that's not all. I know you guys haven't been paid well, and I know the working conditions haven't been great. So, I'm giving everyone a raise. And we're going to clean this place up, make it a decent place to work." A flicker of hope appeared in their weary eyes. "There's just one condition," I added. "I need your help. I need you to be on board with this new way of doing things. No more cutting corners, no more taking advantage of people. We're going to be the good guys now." To my surprise, they agreed. Maybe they were just desperate for a change, or maybe they sensed my sincerity. Whatever the reason, they were willing to give me a chance. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Leo, bless his accountant's heart, practically moved into the office, helping me sort through the chaotic financial records of Predator Towing. We unearthed a treasure trove of questionable charges. Tire disposal fees for cars that clearly still had tires. Administrative fees that seemed to multiply with every invoice. And a particularly egregious HOA liaison fee that strongly suggested a less than ethical arrangement with certain homeowners association presidents. We compiled a list of everyone who had been towed in the past year, cross-referencing it with the fee schedules. The numbers were staggering. Predator Towing had been raking in a fortune by preying on the misfortunes of others. We decided to hold a refund day. We cleaned up the office, painted over the drab walls with a cheerful blue, and put out a call on social media and through local news outlets. The response was overwhelming. People lined up outside Second Chance Towing, clutching their old towing receipts, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and skepticism. I stood behind a table, personally handing out refund checks. There were tears, there were hugs, and there were countless stories of hardship caused by Predator Towing's predatory practices. An elderly woman told me how she had to choose between paying her rent and getting her car back. A single mother recounted the humiliation of being stranded with her children because of an expired parking tag and the exorbitant fee to retrieve her vehicle. Each story fueled my resolve. This wasn't just about getting back at Karen anymore. It was about making a real difference in people's lives. The news of Second Chance Towing's refund day spread like wildfire. Local news crews showed up, eager to capture the heartwarming stories of redemption. And then came the moment I had been both anticipating and dreading. I hitched Bertha to one of our newly refurbished tow trucks, the Second Chance logo gleaming on its side. With Leo riding shotgun, we drove to Karen's pristine, perfectly landscaped house. A small crowd of curious neighbors had already gathered, their phones out, sensing that something interesting was about to go down. Karen emerged from her house, her face a mask of fury. "What in the world is going on here?" she shrieked, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at my tow truck. "You can't park that monstrosity in front of my property." I hopped out of the truck, holding a large, oversized check made out to Karen, HOA president. "Karen," I said, my voice calm and steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. "I'm just returning some money that seems to have been misdirected. This check represents the total amount of kickbacks Predator Towing paid you for every illegal or unjustified tow you authorized in this neighborhood." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Karen's face turned a shade of purple I didn't think was humanly possible. That's a lie," she sputtered, her voice shaking. Just then, a reporter from the local news station stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Miss Karen, is it true that you were receiving kickbacks from Predator Towing?" Karen's carefully constructed facade crumbled. She stammered, her eyes darting around frantically. I held up the check for the cameras. "Second Chance Towing is committed to transparency and ethical practices. We believe the residents of this community deserve better than to be preyed upon by unscrupulous towing companies and their enablers." I handed the oversized check to a stunned neighbor. "Would you be so kind as to deliver this to Miss Karen?" On my no. I then turned back to Bertha, climbed inside, and with Leo beside me, drove away, leaving Karen standing on her perfectly manicured lawn, surrounded by her now disgusted neighbors, the flashing lights of the news van reflecting in her bewildered eyes. The aftermath was interesting. The news story went viral, turning Second Chance Towing into a symbol of righteous retribution. The HOA was thrown into chaos, with a recall election for Karen looming on the horizon. I even got a visit from a friendly police officer who thanked me for exposing Predator Towing's shady dealings, admitting that they had long suspected something was amiss but lacked the evidence. Second Chance Towing thrived. People started calling us not just for tows, but for help with minor car repairs, knowing they wouldn't be ripped off. My crew was happier, the atmosphere in the office was lighter, and even the impound lot seemed a little less depressing. One evening, as I was finally putting Bertha back in my driveway, Leo leaned against my fence, a can of beer in his hand. "You know," he said, taking a sip, "this whole thing has been completely insane." "Yeah," I chuckled, running a hand over Bertha's cool metal surface. "But it was worth it, right?" Leo grinned. "Absolutely. You went full vigilante carpenter on them." "Hey," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "Sometimes you just gotta build your own justice." I looked at Bertha, my trusty trailer, finally home. It had been a wild ride, a ridiculous, improbable journey sparked by a petty act of suburban tyranny. But in the end, it wasn't just about getting my trailer back. It was about building something better, one tow and one refund, at a time. And that, I realized, was a project I was truly proud of. The calls started trickling in a week later. Initially, it was just folks from our neighborhood, people who'd had run-ins with Predator Towing in the past and were emboldened by the news story. They'd swing by Second Chance Towing, clutching faded receipts and sharing tales of woe, their voices filled with a mixture of resentment and a newfound hope. We meticulously reviewed each case, Leo poring over the financial records with the dedication of an archaeologist unearthing ancient secrets, and me cross-referencing their stories with the notes we'd found. It was a slow, painstaking process, but each returned fee felt like a small victory against the tide of corporate greed that had washed over our quiet suburban streets. Then, the calls started coming from further afield. People from neighboring communities who had also fallen victim to Predator's predatory practices reached out, their voices echoing the same frustration and anger. It became clear that Karen wasn't the only HOA president in Mr. Slate's pocket. The web of illicit agreements stretched further than I had initially imagined. Running a towing company was a far cry from carpentry. I spent hours on the phone, dealing with insurance companies, dispatching trucks, and learning the arcane language of towing regulations. My crew, initially skeptical, had fully embraced the change. They saw the genuine appreciation from the people we helped, the relief on their faces when they received their refunds. The toxic atmosphere that had permeated predator towing was slowly dissipating, replaced by a sense of purpose and even, dare I say it, pride. One particularly memorable case involved a young woman whose car had been towed from her apartment complex for a parking sticker that had fallen off her windshield. Predator had slapped her with an exorbitant towing fee and several days of storage charges, leaving her without transportation to her new job. When she came to our office, her eyes were red-rimmed and her voice trembled with desperation. We not only refunded her fees, but also gave her a free oil change, courtesy of our surprisingly competent mechanic. She left our office with tears of gratitude streaming down her face, and her heartfelt thank you note, scrawled on a napkin, became a permanent fixture on our office bulletin board. The recall election for Karen was a landslide. The residents, galvanized by the revelations of her complicity with predator towing, voted her out in droves. A new HOA board, promising transparency and accountability, was elected, and one of their first actions was to sever all ties with any towing company with a history of predatory practices. They even approached me about the possibility of Second Chance Towing becoming their preferred vendor, a testament to the transformation our company had undergone. The local news continued to follow our story, painting me as a sort of blue-collar hero who had stood up to corporate greed and won. While the attention was flattering, it also brought its challenges. We were inundated with requests for refunds, some legitimate, others less so. Leo developed a finely tuned system for verifying claims, his accounting skills proving invaluable in sifting through the murky waters of Predator's past transactions. Running two businesses, carpentry and towing, was exhausting. I found myself working longer hours than ever before, juggling client meetings, job site visits, and the day-to-day operations of Second Chance Towing. But the sense of satisfaction I got from helping people, from righting the wrongs of the past, kept me going. One afternoon, as I was working on a custom bookshelf for a client, my phone rang. It was Mr. Slate. "Look, kid," his voice was surprisingly subdued. "I heard what you're doing, this second chances thing." "Yeah?" I replied cautiously, wondering what he wanted. "You're giving away all my profits," he grumbled. "What's the point?" "The point, Mr. Slate," I said, trying to keep the satisfaction out of my voice, "is that some things are more important than profit. Like treating people fairly." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, a grudging, almost inaudible, "Huh," and the line went dead. I never heard from him again. As the months passed, Second Chance Towing became a fixture in the community. We sponsored local Little League teams, offered discounts to seniors and veterans, and even started a stranded motorist program, offering free tows to anyone within a certain radius who had broken down. We weren't just a towing company anymore. We were a community resource. Bertha, my trusty trailer, remained my primary workshop, but she now proudly sported a small, Second Chance Towing, "We've Got Your Back" sticker on her side. Every time I saw it, it reminded me of the crazy chain of events that had led me here. A petty act of spite from an HOA Karen had inadvertently launched me on a path I never could have imagined. Looking back, it was almost comical how it all started. A parking violation, a ridiculous towing fee, and a moment of pure, unadulterated rage. But that rage had been channeled, not into petty revenge, but into something meaningful, something that had a real, positive impact on the lives of others. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, when I was working late in Bertha, the scent of sawdust and possibility filling the air, I would think about Karen, and I couldn't help but smile. She had tried to tow away my livelihood, but instead, she had inadvertently helped me build something even better. And for that, in a strange, twisted way, I almost had to thank her. Almost.